Have you noticed something shift in what you're searching for? Perhaps you've spent years chasing happiness, seeking the next pleasant moment, the next compliment, the next reason to smile. And yet, after all those years, after all that striving, happiness still comes and goes like weather. One day bright, the next day clouded. One moment you feel content, the next you're unsettled by a phone call, a memory, or simply the silence of an empty house. There comes a point, usually somewhere in the later decades of life, when you begin to realize something profound. Maybe happiness was never the real goal. Maybe what you've been truly longing for all along is something deeper, something steadier, something that doesn't abandon you when circumstances shift. What you've been seeking is peace. Not the excitement of happiness, but the quiet strength of a heart that remains unshaken, regardless of whether life brings sunshine or storm. The Buddha understood this distinction clearly. He taught that suffering arises when we chase after fleeting pleasures and resist inevitable pains. But peace, what Buddhists call upeksha or equanimity, is something altogether different. It's the ability to stand steady in the middle of everything, like a mountain that remains unmoved, whether winds blow gentle or fierce. Today, we're going to explore why peace, not happiness, is what truly sustains us in these later years. We'll look at how to cultivate this inner steadiness through both mind and body, how to navigate the karmic relationships that test us most deeply, and how to build something within yourself that no circumstance can ever take away. Because after 60, 70, 80 years of living, you've earned the right to stop chasing and start resting in something real. Let's begin by understanding what we've been getting wrong all along. For most of your life, you were probably taught that happiness is the goal. Get good grades, find a good job, build a good family, accumulate enough comfort and security, and happiness will follow. And perhaps for stretches of time, it did. There were golden periods when everything felt right, when the pieces seemed to fall into place, when you woke up feeling grateful and went to bed satisfied. But if you're honest with yourself, you'll notice that happiness has always been conditional. It depended on your health being good, your relationships being smooth, your finances being stable, your plans working out. The moment any of those conditions shifted, happiness evaporated like morning dew under harsh sunlight. One medical diagnosis, one argument with a loved one, one unexpected loss, and suddenly the happiness you thought was yours revealed itself to be merely borrowed, never truly owned. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about anicca, impermanence. Everything that arises passes away. Every pleasant feeling, every moment of joy, every reason you have to smile today will eventually change or end. Not because life is cruel, but because this is simply the nature of existence. To cling to happiness is like trying to hold water in your cupped hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips through your fingers. There's a traditional Buddhist story that speaks to this beautifully. A wealthy merchant once came to a monastery seeking the Buddha's guidance. He said, "Venerable teacher, I have worked hard all my life. I've built a successful business, married a good woman, raised healthy children. I've done everything I was told would bring happiness. And yet I wake up each morning with a heaviness I cannot name. Why am I not happy?" The Buddha smiled gently and replied, "You have mistaken the guest house for your home. Happiness is a visitor that comes and goes. It is welcome when it arrives, but you must not chain it to your door. Peace is your true dwelling. It is always there, waiting for you to recognize it." The merchant looked confused. "But teacher, how do I find this peace you speak of?" The Buddha said, Stop searching outside yourself for what can only be found within. Stop demanding that life remain pleasant. Accept that it will bring both joy and sorrow, success and failure, gain and loss. When you cease fighting against the natural flow of existence, when you stop grasping at what must leave and resisting what must come, peace reveals itself, not as something you achieve, but as something you've always been standing on. This teaching becomes especially crucial after 60. By now, you've lived long enough to see happiness come and go countless times. You've experienced enough losses to know that no pleasant circumstance lasts forever. You've weathered enough storms to understand that seeking happiness alone leaves you perpetually vulnerable, perpetually at the mercy of conditions beyond your control. Peace, by contrast, doesn't depend on circumstances. It can coexist with sadness, with difficulty, even with physical pain. Peace isn't the absence of hardship, it's the presence of an inner stability that remains untouched by the changing weather of life. It's what allows one person to face terminal illness with dignity, while another falls apart at a minor inconvenience. It's what enables an elder to sit quietly in a modest apartment, surrounded by very little, yet radiating a contentment that no mansion could provide. This is the invitation of your later years, to shift from chasing happiness to cultivating peace, to stop outsourcing your well-being to circumstances, and instead build something unshakable within yourself. And the Buddha gave us very specific teachings on how to do exactly that. Let's talk about something practical, something you can feel in your bones. The Buddha taught that peace doesn't exist only in the mind. It's cultivated through the body and expressed through action. There's an ancient understanding that virtues exist on two levels, virtues of action and virtues of mind. And here's what's crucial. The mind nourishes action, and action proves the mind. They are not separate. Think of virtues of action: loyalty, trustworthiness, respect, courage. These are the ways you show up in the world, the way you treat others, the integrity of your word and deed. But here's what many people miss. You cannot behave with genuine respect if your inner state is weak and reactive. You cannot act with true courage if your mind is consumed by fear and clinging. The outer virtues only become authentic when they're supported by inner virtues. The inner virtues are patience, persistence, perseverance through difficulty, the capacity to bear discomfort without collapsing into reactivity. These mental qualities are what make ethical action possible. Without inner discipline, your kindness becomes conditional. Without inner steadiness, your loyalty wavers when tested. Without inner strength, your respect for others dissolves the moment they disappoint you. The Buddhist path recognizes this deeply. This is why meditation, why inner cultivation, is not separate from ethical living. They support each other. When you train your mind to remain steady in the face of difficulty, you naturally begin to act with more integrity. And when you commit to acting with integrity even when it's hard, you strengthen your mind's capacity to remain steady. I once knew a woman named Dorothy, 76 years old, who exemplified this integration beautifully. She had been a nurse for 40 years, caring for patients through their most vulnerable moments. In her later years, even after retirement, people in her neighborhood would seek her out for advice, for comfort, for simply being in her presence. One day I asked her, "Dorothy, what made you so steady? How did you stay calm through all those years of witnessing suffering?" She paused, considering her words carefully. Then she said, "Early in my career, I thought my job was to fix people's pain, to make everything better, and whenever I couldn't, I felt like I'd failed. I'd go home exhausted, carrying everyone's suffering with me. But an older nurse once told me something that changed everything. She said, "You can't control whether they heal. You can only control whether you show up with a steady heart. Your presence, your calm, your refusal to be shaken, that's often more healing than any medicine." Dorothy continued, "So I started practicing, not just at work, but at home, in small moments. When my husband would get frustrated over small things, instead of reacting, I'd pause, I'd breathe. I'd remind myself that his irritation was his to feel, not mine to absorb or fight against. When my children made choices I disagreed with, instead of trying to control them, I'd practice simply being present, offering support without attachment to outcomes. Over time, my mind grew stronger. And that strength showed up in how I treated everyone, patients and family alike. This is what the Buddha meant by right effort. Not striving to be perfect, but training the mind to remain present and steady regardless of circumstances. And from that steadiness, virtuous action flows naturally. Now, here's where it gets challenging for those of us in later life. You might have developed this inner peace to some degree. You might have learned to remain calm when strangers irritate you, when plans fall through, when minor disappointments arise. But then there are certain people, usually family, who have this uncanny ability to completely unsettle you in ways no one else can. The Buddha recognized this. He understood that we have what might be called karmic relationships, deep connections with certain people whose state directly affects our inner world. These are usually parents, children, spouses, lifelong friends, people with whom our lives are so intertwined that their pain becomes our pain, their chaos becomes our chaos. You can be perfectly peaceful, and then one phone call from your daughter describing her struggles, and suddenly your entire nervous system is activated. One visit from your son who seems lost and directionless, and all your carefully cultivated equanimity evaporates. This doesn't mean you love them wrongly. It means you're human. The Buddha didn't teach detachment in the cold sense. He taught wise relationship, which includes recognizing that certain bonds run so deep that they will always have the power to move us. The question is not whether they affect us, but how we learn to remain steady even within that effect. Deep peace, at this stage of life, comes from learning to self-regulate even when you're emotionally entangled with others. It comes from recognizing, yes, my child is suffering. Yes, I feel that suffering in my own heart, and I cannot fix it for them. I cannot carry their pain as if it were mine to solve. The most loving thing I can do is remain steady in my own center, so I can be a source of strength rather than another wave in their storm. There's a practice in Buddhism called metta, loving-kindness meditation. Part of this practice involves recognizing that even those we love most cannot always be happy, and our love for them must include accepting this truth. We send them wishes for peace, for well-being, for freedom from suffering. But we also recognize that each person must walk their own path, face their own lessons, cultivate their own inner strength. Our peace cannot be dependent on their circumstances remaining pleasant. This doesn't mean withdrawing from them. It means showing up with a steady heart rather than an anxious one. It means offering presence rather than frantic problem-solving. It means modeling the very peace you wish for them, knowing that sometimes the greatest gift is simply demonstrating that it's possible to remain unshaken in the midst of life's storms. Let me share something that might initially sound harsh, but contains profound wisdom. Pain doesn't disappear. What changes is your relationship with pain. This understanding is central to finding peace in these later years, when the body inevitably brings more discomfort, when losses accumulate, when difficulties don't magically resolve. In traditional Buddhist training, there's an emphasis on what might be called walking through the valley of pain. Not seeking pain, not glorifying it, but recognizing that the capacity to bear difficulty without collapsing is what ultimately sets you free. When you can sit with physical discomfort without panicking, when you can face emotional pain without numbing, when you can endure uncertainty without desperately grasping for control, something remarkable happens. Your decisions are no longer controlled by the avoidance of discomfort. Think about how much of your life has been shaped by avoiding pain, the conversations you didn't have because they felt too difficult, the changes you didn't make because they seemed too uncomfortable, the truths you didn't speak because the temporary discomfort felt unbearable, the relationships you stayed in or left not because of what was right, but because of what hurt less in the moment. This pattern keeps you hostage, because as long as decisions are driven by the avoidance of discomfort, you're not truly free. You're simply reactive, bouncing from one temporary relief to the next, never really addressing what needs to be addressed, never really growing into your full capacity. Buddhist practice, particularly meditation, trains this capacity. You sit still even when your knees ache. You stay present even when emotions surge. You keep breathing even when the mind screams to escape. And gradually, through thousands of small moments of not fleeing discomfort, you discover something liberating. The pain is still there, but you're no longer controlled by it. You can feel it fully and still choose wisely. You can acknowledge difficulty and still act with integrity. This doesn't mean becoming numb or indifferent. It means developing what the Buddha called virya, often translated as effort or energy, but really meaning the perseverance to stay present regardless of whether the moment is pleasant or painful. It's the quality that allows you to sit with a grieving friend without trying to cheer them up. It's what enables you to face your own mortality without denying it. It's the strength that keeps you showing up for life, even when life is hard. One thing that steals peace more efficiently than almost anything else is worry. The Buddha understood this intimately. Studies suggest that about 90% of what we worry about never actually happens. We spend enormous energy rehearsing disasters that remain imaginary. We lie awake at night playing out conversations that will never occur, preparing for crises that never arrive, fearing losses that don't materialize. This mental habit is exhausting. It drains the present moment of its vitality, sacrificing the real for the imagined. And here's what's particularly cruel about chronic worry. Even when feared events do occur, all that prior worrying doesn't help. It doesn't prepare you. It just means you suffered twice, once in anticipation and once in reality. The path to peace requires recognizing a fundamental truth that life naturally contains both light and dark, success and failure, joy and sorrow. Not sometimes, always. These aren't anomalies to be solved. They're the fabric of existence itself. The Buddha taught this as the first noble truth. Life includes suffering, dissatisfaction, the inevitable friction that comes from impermanence and change. This isn't pessimism, it's clear seeing. When you accept this, genuinely accept it, not just intellectually but in your bones, something shifts. You stop being shocked when difficulties arise. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How do I meet this with wisdom and grace?" You stop resisting the fundamental nature of existence and start working skillfully within it. Freedom comes from accepting the whole, not from clinging to the illusion that everything must be pleasant. You can appreciate joy when it's here without needing it to stay forever. You can face sorrow when it arrives without believing it will last eternally. Both are visitors. Both will pass. and your peace doesn't depend on which one is currently at the door. There's a Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." The tasks don't change. What changes is the relationship to them, the inner steadiness that remains regardless of whether the day brings roses or thorns. This is what we're cultivating. Not a life free from difficulty, but a heart that remains unshaken within difficulty. Let's address something uncomfortable but essential. Most of the suffering in your life right now is not coming from your actual circumstances. It's coming from the image you hold of yourself, the identity you've spent decades constructing and defending. This image, this sense of me and mine, is largely an illusion, and clinging to it creates immense suffering. The Buddha taught anatta, the doctrine of non-self. Not that you don't exist, but that what you think of as your fixed, permanent self is actually a constantly changing collection of physical sensations, thoughts, emotions, memories, and habits. There's no solid, unchanging you to be found anywhere. And yet, we spend enormous energy maintaining the fiction that there is. We cling to roles. I am a mother. I am a professional. I am capable. I am respected. And when those roles shift, when children move away, when careers end, when capabilities decline, when respect wanes, we suffer. Not because anything is inherently wrong with change, but because we've identified so deeply with temporary conditions that their shifting feels like our dissolution. Here's a powerful shift in perspective the Buddha offered. You need to become not just the actor in your life, but also the director watching the scene. Most of us are so immersed in our experience, so identified with our thoughts and emotions, that we believe we are them. A thought of worthlessness arises, and we conclude, "I am worthless." A feeling of anxiety surges, and we believe I am anxious. But there's another possibility. You can learn to observe these experiences without being consumed by them. You can notice, a thought of worthlessness is arising. Interesting. You can feel, there's anxiety moving through the body right now. This slight shift from being the experience to witnessing the experience creates enormous space. It doesn't make difficult feelings disappear, but it prevents them from defining you. Clinging to identity, to roles, to possessions, to fixed ideas of who you should be creates suffering, because all of these are impermanent. Your body will change, your relationships will shift, your possessions will leave you, or you'll leave them. Your roles will evolve or end. The tighter you grip any of them as essential to your identity, the more you suffer as they inevitably transform. Peace comes from loosening this grip, from recognizing that you are not your achievements, not your failures, not your body, not even your thoughts. You are the awareness that witnesses all of these, and that awareness, that basic consciousness, remains steady regardless of what arises and passes within it. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Your true refuge is not any external condition or internal identity. It's the simple awareness that remains present through all changes. If you're truly committed to cultivating peace, you must address the patterns that keep you trapped in cycles of reactivity. To break patterns, you must first see them clearly. This requires honest self-examination, the willingness to notice, whenever my son calls and mentions financial stress, I immediately launch into advice-giving mode, and he gets defensive, and we end up in conflict. This same pattern, again and again. The Buddhist practice of mindfulness is precisely this. Becoming aware of your automatic reactions before they take over, noticing the trigger, the bodily sensation that arises, the habitual thought pattern that follows, the action that usually results, and then the suffering that perpetuates. When you can see the whole cycle clearly, you create the possibility of choosing differently. But seeing patterns isn't enough. You must also cultivate new habits to replace the old ones. This doesn't happen through occasional dramatic efforts. It happens through consistency. The Buddha emphasized this in his teaching of right effort. It's not about forcing transformation through willpower. It's about patient, steady practice, day after day, moment after moment. There's wisdom in aiming for 1% progress every day rather than 100% effort in one day. The person who tries to meditate for 3 hours on Sunday but never sits the rest of the week won't progress as much as the person who sits for 10 minutes every single morning. Small, consistent changes reshape your entire nervous system over time. They train new pathways, new default responses, new ways of being that become increasingly natural. And here's what you'll discover. Replacing old habits with new ones through patient consistency is actually compassionate. It acknowledges that you're human, that change takes time, that perfection isn't required. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to show up today, do what you can today, and trust that these small daily investments accumulate into profound transformation. Let's address one of the most common traps, especially in a culture that constantly promises fulfillment through acquisition. You've probably noticed the endless cycle. Desire a new phone, get it, feel briefly satisfied, then desire the next model. Want a nicer car, achieve it, enjoy it briefly, then notice someone with something better. Dream of a perfect retirement, reach it, feel good for a while, then begin longing for something else. This is what the Buddha called tanha, the craving that's never satisfied. No matter what you acquire, achieve, or experience, if your happiness is conditional on external circumstances, it will always be fragile. Because external circumstances always change, the new becomes old, the novel becomes familiar, the exciting becomes routine, and the cycle begins again. Here's the subtle trap. The problem isn't having things, it's identifying with them. It's believing that you need them to be complete. When you think, I'll be happy when, or I'd be content if only, you've fallen into the illusion that peace is somewhere out there, waiting to be obtained. But as long as peace is conditional, it's not peace. It's just another temporary state, dependent on circumstances remaining favorable. What would it mean to cultivate inner fullness that doesn't depend on anything external? This is the core invitation of Buddhist practice, not rejecting the world, not becoming an ascetic who owns nothing, but developing such profound inner contentment that whether you have much or little, you remain at peace. The Buddha once said, "Health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth." Not health as perfect condition of body, but health as basic aliveness. Not wealth as accumulated possessions, but wealth as inner satisfaction that needs nothing added to be complete. This is what we're pointing toward, a sense of fullness that arises not from getting what you want, but from wanting nothing beyond what is. Life can take away almost everything. Your health can decline, your loved ones can leave or die, your possessions can be lost, your abilities can diminish, but the sense of inner completeness you cultivate within cannot be taken. It's not dependent on circumstances. It's the fruit of years of practice, of learning to rest in awareness itself, rather than in the contents of awareness. This doesn't happen overnight. It's the work of these later years, the patient cultivation of recognizing again and again, this moment, exactly as it is enough. I don't need it to be different to be at peace. There's a practice that might seem strange but holds profound wisdom. refining the mind through the body. Your mental state and physical state are intimately connected. When the body is neglected, tense, stagnant, the mind becomes clouded, agitated, unclear. When the body is cared for, moved gently, allowed to breathe fully, the mind naturally settles into greater peace. The Buddha emphasized this in the very first foundation of mindfulness. Start with the body. Notice the breath. Feel the sensations. Move with awareness. This isn't exercise for fitness. It's meditation in motion, the practice of inhabiting your physical form with conscious attention. At 60, 70, 80 years old, this becomes especially important. If you've been sitting still for 7 straight days, barely moving, rarely going outside, never stretching or walking, of course you feel imbalanced and mentally restless. The body and mind are not separate. When the body stagnates, energy stagnates, and with it, mental clarity and peace. This doesn't require intensity. A gentle walk each morning, paying attention to each step, some simple stretches, feeling the body wake up, standing outside for a few moments, letting sunlight touch your face, breathing fresh air. These small physical practices recalibrate your entire system. They remind you that you're not just a mind trapped in a failing body. You're an integrated whole, and caring for one aspect naturally supports the other. As you refine your attention to the body, something remarkable begins to happen. You become more sensitive to energy, to the subtle currents beneath surface appearances. You can sense when someone is genuinely at peace or merely performing peace. You can feel when a smile is authentic or manufactured. You begin to notice the difference between someone who's truly listening and someone who's just waiting to speak. This sensitivity isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. It helps you navigate relationships more wisely. You learn to trust your felt sense of situations. You can recognize when something feels off, even if you can't immediately articulate why. And this helps you make adjustments to fine-tune your life toward greater harmony, rather than remaining stuck in patterns that quietly deplete you. The Buddha spoke of this as developing discernment, the ability to distinguish what nourishes from what depletes, what brings you closer to peace from what creates more agitation. And this discernment grows stronger as you pay attention, as you become present to the actual texture of your experience rather than just the stories you tell about it. Here's a practical framework that's helpful for these later years. Most people, even after retirement, invest almost all their energy outward, thinking about others, worrying about children, staying busy with tasks and obligations, consuming news and entertainment. Very little attention turns inward toward cultivating inner life, toward meditation, reflection, or simply being present with yourself. A healthier balance is dedicating at least 20% of your energy inward, not abandoning the world, not neglecting relationships, but carving out significant time and attention for inner work. Morning meditation, evening reflection, walks in nature, where you're truly present rather than lost in thought. Moments throughout the day where you pause and simply feel your own breath, your own presence. Over time, this balance can shift even further, perhaps toward 50 to 50. Half your energy devoted to being in the world, engaging with others, fulfilling necessary tasks, and half devoted to simply being, to presence, to the cultivation of that inner peace that becomes your greatest gift to everyone around you. Because here's what you'll discover. The more established you are in your own peace, the more naturally you can offer genuine support to others without being depleted. When you're operating from inner fullness, helping doesn't exhaust you, listening doesn't drain you, being present with someone else's difficulty doesn't destabilize you. Your peace becomes a refuge, not just for yourself, but for everyone who enters your presence. This is why the Buddha emphasized both wisdom and compassion. Wisdom turns you inward to cultivate understanding and peace. Compassion turns you outward to serve others. But compassion without wisdom leads to burnout, and wisdom without compassion becomes cold and isolated. The balance, the integration of both, creates a life of profound depth and genuine service. Let's bring all of this into the most immediate, most accessible practice available to you right now: your breath. The Buddha repeatedly pointed to the breath as the gateway to presence, the anchor that brings you back from wherever your mind has wandered. This isn't complicated. It's as simple as feeling the air enter your nostrils, feeling your chest and belly expand, feeling the slight pause at the top of the breath, feeling the air leave your body. Right now, wherever you are, you can take one conscious breath, feel it fully. Notice how even this single moment of attention creates a small gap in the mental chatter, a brief space of clarity and calm. This is the present moment. This is where life actually happens, not in your thoughts about the past or worries about the future, but here, now, in this living, breathing instant. The Buddha taught that the present moment is the only place where suffering cannot live by itself. Yes, pain exists now. Discomfort, challenge, difficulty, all can be present. But suffering, the additional layer of resistance, of this shouldn't be happening, of anxious projection into future disasters or bitter rumination on past failures, that suffering requires you to leave the present moment. When you're truly here, fully present, suffering dissolves, leaving only what is, exactly as it is. This is why mindfulness practice is so central to finding peace. Every time you notice your mind has wandered into worry, and you gently bring attention back to the breath, back to the body, back to the sounds around you, back to the taste of your tea, you're training the capacity to rest in presence. And presence is peace. It doesn't require special circumstances. You can practice this while washing dishes, feeling the warm water on your hands, while walking, noticing each step, the texture of the ground beneath your feet, while eating, truly tasting your food rather than swallowing it unconsciously while thinking about something else. Every moment is an invitation to wake up, to stop living in your head and start living in your actual life. Peace is not something far away, not something you achieve after years of perfect meditation. It's available right now, in this breath, in this moment, when you stop demanding that life be different and simply open to what is. This is the profound simplicity the Buddha taught. This is what he meant when he said, enlightenment is the end of suffering. Not the end of pain, not the end of challenge, but the end of the internal war against reality. You don't need a perfect life. You need a heart wide enough to stay steady in the storm. You don't need circumstances to always be pleasant. You need the inner strength to remain present, whether they're pleasant or painful. This is what these later years are inviting you toward. Not more achievements, not more accumulation, but deeper presence, steadier peace, greater freedom from the endless demands of a restless mind. Peace doesn't come from the outside. It arises from knowing yourself, from releasing fear, from accepting uncertainty, from rewiring old habits, from caring for both body and mind, from living in the present rather than in the endless stories about the present. Happiness fades. Peace remains. Happiness depends on conditions. Peace exists independent of conditions. Happiness is something you chase. Peace is something you become. The Buddha once told his disciples, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." This is both sobering and liberating. Sobering, because it means no one else can do this work for you. Liberating because it means you already have everything you need. Your breath, your body, your awareness, your capacity for presence. These are the tools, and they're always available. So what will you do with the time you have left? Will you continue chasing happiness, perpetually disappointed when it doesn't last, perpetually searching for the next temporary relief? Or will you turn inward, cultivate the inner steadiness that remains unshaken, build a peace that no circumstance can steal? This is not an abstract philosophical question. This is the most practical choice you face each day. In this moment, right now, are you fighting against what is, wishing it were different, lost in worry about what might happen, or regret about what already happened? Or are you here, breathing, present, resting in the simple awareness that you are alive, you are conscious, and this moment, exactly as it is your life? The invitation is clear. The path is simple. The practice is available. All that remains is your willingness to walk it, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, one day at a time, slowly building the inner fullness that transforms everything without changing anything at all. If this message has touched something in you, if you sense the possibility of peace beyond happiness, I encourage you to begin. Not tomorrow, not after you've figured everything out, but now. Take one conscious breath. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice the miracle that after all these years, all these experiences, all these losses and gains, you are still here, still breathing, still capable of presence, still able to choose peace. Share your reflections in the comments if you feel moved to. What practices help you find peace? What makes it difficult? We're all walking this path together, learning from each other, supporting one another in the cultivation of what truly matters. Subscribe if you'd like to continue exploring these ancient wisdoms made accessible for modern life. Because peace, true peace, is not a destination you reach someday. It's a way of being you can practice right now, in this very moment, as you read these words. The Buddha's last words before he died were simple and profound. All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your liberation with diligence. Everything changes, everything passes. But the peace you cultivate within, the steady awareness you develop, the inner freedom you claim, this becomes your true home, unchanging in the midst of all change. This is what remains when happiness fades. This is what carries you through every storm. This is what you've been searching for all along.